military battle is still on, and so is the battle of narratives, an information war. The adversaries are the same, the Russian state media and Western media outlets. They've both weaponized information for the benefit of their respective governments.
Moscow is increasingly using harsh tactics to control information about the war. This includes banning Facebook and passing a law that could jail journalists and others for promoting what it calls fake news about its military.
Even specific battle stories are questionable. For instance, the number of casualties. Headlines in Western media say that Putin's forces are being humiliated.
So far, the Ukrainian military says they have shot down or destroyed 48 Russian airplanes and 80 helicopters, captured or destroyed 303 Russian tanks and hundreds of mechanized vehicles and cars, and have taken out 2 Russian naval vessels.
Most of them are going by Ukraine's figures. They say 11,000 Russian soldiers have been killed. That is at least 22 times higher than what the Kremlin says. These wild variations also extend to accounts of destruction on both sides. Ukraine says it has destroyed more than 300 Russian tanks. Russia says it has destroyed around 900 Ukrainian tanks. Both sides say the other is lying. These differences illustrate the kind of story each side wants to offer to its own people. Ukraine wants to encourage its people through the tale of a successful resistance. Russia wants to convince its people.
We have been watching RT, the Russian-owned news channel available in most American cable homes. They have graphics on the screen which say things like disarming Ukraine. An operation in Ukraine comes after months of failed Western talks. Here are just some moments from today alone.
What Putin is doing, he had every right to do. At the end of the day, he was defending those 2 nations that he just made independent from ongoing years of war that the Ukraine has been inflicting.
Welcome to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. Moscow repeatedly warned it would not tolerate Ukraine being used by NATO to threaten Russia's national security.
Russia has made clear it has no intent to invade Ukraine. However, at this point, they are engaging in an operation to protect the people of Donetsk and Lugansk and make sure they do not continue to face the shelling and bombardment they have been enduring for the past 8 years.
The president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has said that Putin chose to bring war back to Europe. Now, this is factually incorrect. You need to remember, of course, that the war has been ongoing since 2014. So that's 8 years. And the Western media and Western diplomats are at fault for not pointing that out.
And neither wants to talk about the casualties in their own ranks. So which side does one really believe? Verifying their figures is a tough job. This is an armed conflict, remember. Access to combat zones is limited. There are no independent observers. So we don't know how much of the information is being filtered, modified, blocked, or concocted. Multiple storylines, multiple narratives and counter-narratives are doing the rounds. The first one is that the Ukrainians are successfully defending their land. How then did Russian troops reach the outskirts of Kiev in just 2 days? The second narrative is that Russian troops are making slow progress. How can they gauge the pace of Russia's progress with no access to Russia's battle plans? There's also a third narrative, which is essentially a moral binary. Whatever the West says is right, and anyone who does not accept this narrative is trying to undermine Ukraine's sovereignty. Now, all of these narratives can be challenged, should be challenged. In the age of social media, unfiltered information shapes opinions. What's worse, social media is not a level playing field. It is controlled by the West. I'm talking about tech giants like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Google, and Apple. These companies, these private companies, have openly aligned themselves with the West. They're pushing the Western narrative and restricting Russia's side of the story. And this is problematic. I will tell you why. First of all, let's tell you what they've done. They've sanctioned Russia digitally. Remember, no government sanction forced tech companies to cut ties with Russia. There was no legal or regulatory obligation. These companies just decided to take a side based on the perspective of their stakeholders. Google has barred Russian state media from monetizing content on its platforms. Apple has gone one step further. It has suspended all product sales in Russia, cut Russians off Apple Play and other services. It has also blocked RT and Sputnik from its app store everywhere outside Russia. Then we have Twitter. It is labeling all posts by the Russian state media, adding a warning of sorts on pro-Russian stories. Then we come to Meta, the parent company of Facebook. It has left its contemporaries way behind. I'll show you a report. It was released on Friday. It says Facebook and Instagram will allow posts calling for violence against Russians and their president, Vladimir Putin. Isn't that criminal? Won't this promote hate? Won't this incite hostility against all Russians? These tech giants are overstepping their purpose, deciding when it's okay to call for violence and when it's not. And this sets a wrong precedent. It also raises strategic questions for other countries. What if America were the aggressor in this conflict? What if the US had invaded another country, which they have in the past? Would these tech giants have done the same? Look at this map now. It shows all the countries that the United States has either invaded or been militarily involved in. Do you know how many there are? The US has invaded or fought in at least 84 of the 193 countries recognized by the United Nations. And none of what I've just told you justifies Russia's actions. The invasion is wrong and criminal, no two ways about it. What I want to underline here is the hypocrisy of American institutions, the selective approach of big tech. In 2021, 3 American rights groups released a report. It said that instead of staying neutral, big tech made huge profits from America's war on terror, especially Facebook, Google, Microsoft, and Amazon. They were awarded $44.5 billion in contracts, $44.5 billion, from the Pentagon and the US Department of Homeland Security. What were these contracts about? Aiding the US military in its operations, providing them with digital tools that can be used in wars. What kind of tools? Crucial databases, cloud computing services, surveillance, drone technology, even pushing narratives. The report says that Facebook alone sold $350,000 worth of advertising to promote America's federally funded Extremism Watch. It covers stories on violent extremism trends in Islamic nations. Facebook helped this government-owned platform promote these stories. And this was just one contract. This report says that there were hundreds of other contracts and subcontracts that were awarded to American tech giants, yet to be made public. Just to be clear, we're talking about platforms that have a direct line to the hearts and minds of billions of people the world over. 2.7 billion people use Facebook daily. 206 million people use Twitter daily. YouTube has 122 million daily active users. Imagine the kind of reach and potential big tech has in manipulating global opinion about America's actions, in controlling conversations about a conflict America is involved in. Things get murkier when you look at who's running these platforms. A report by another US rights group says that hundreds of former US government officials are currently serving in key positions at big tech companies. This includes officials from the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security and Justice, the National Security Agency, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This is Jared Cohen. He was a policy planner at the US State Department. He currently runs Jigsaw, a technology incubator created by Google to develop counter-terrorism tools for social media platforms. This is Steve Pandelides. He worked at the FBI for 20 years. He's currently the director of security at Amazon Web Services. This is Joseph D. Rozek. He worked at the Department of Defense. He now works at Microsoft, where he specializes in quote-unquote information sharing. And these are just a few names. There are many, many more. Reports say there's a revolving door of sorts between big tech and US government agencies, countless security officials and policymakers pigeonholing information to suit American interests. They say whoever controls the flow of information controls the world. There could be no better description of what's happening right now. Russia is the aggressor in the conflict in Ukraine, yes, but the West's monopoly on information flow is making things complex. We cannot take every story on face value. We cannot confuse visibility with transparency. Not until the gatekeepers of the world's information keep global interests above their own.